Yacht Foyer? Do you remember Yacht Foyer? He used to get some, it's not very much. But Timmy and we've all been friends from Europe. And so Timmy's married to Kara. You know, Gene Howells, who's a name's author. Cool. She
night, no. But that's your custom.
It's not. It's other people's custom. I don't really like to wear it except on like Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur. So. Great.
People are really time anyway. But
Yeah.
so glad you guys are here.
Yeah. Sunglasses. Nice. It's a nice hiding place. Do you want to call page numbers or should I?
What do you come up with?
I'm comfortable doing whatever.
Okay, so just so you know, we got a camera over there, and that's mic is live already. So people are listening. They'll hear that. They actually will hear that better than in here. It's amazing. Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, not if you've been running for office, at least, you know.
Definitely not. All right, I'll take a seat somewhere. Yeah.
Chag Sameach, everyone. It is so great to have you here and to have our two rabbinical students who've come up from Los Angeles to spend the holiday with us so that we can learn from them and be with them. Nico Losarelli is going to be leading us in the Arvit in the Mariv service, which begins on page 100 and on page 39. I have no idea what I'm talking about. See that? We need these next rabbinical students. Tell us where we're at.
Usually.
So if you turn around for that, we'll rise for...
So please rise for Baruch Hu. Page 39. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach leolam va'ed. ומעביר יום ומביא לילה, המבדיל בין יום ובין לילה, אדוני צבאות שמו, אל חי וקיים, תמיד ימלוך עלינו לעולם ועד, ברוך אתה אדוני, המעריב הרביעי. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגי יומם ולילה, ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל, אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד. אדוני אלוהיכם אמת. ומלכותו ברצון קיבלו עליהם משה ומרים ובני ישראל הכנו שירה בשמחה רבה ואמרו כולם מי כמוך באלים אדוני מי כמוך נדר בקודש נורא תהילות עושה פלא מלכותך ראו בניך בוקעים לפני משה זה לי אנו ואמרו אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר כי פדר נא את יעקב גלו מיד חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גל ישראל השכיבנו. ושמור צאתנו בואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם ופרוס עלינו סוכת שלומך ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים יתקדש ויתקדש שמרבה בעלמא נברא קירותה וימליך מלכותה בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך לעולם עולמי המאיה יתברך יסתבח יתבר וירמה וינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתהלל שמי קודשה בריחו לילה מכל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירם בעלמה ואמרו אמן.
Turn now to page 306 for the festival Amidah.
יתגדל ויקדש שמי רבה, ועלמא לברכיותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון ובימכון ובחיי כל בית ישראל, בגלה בזמן קריב ואמרו אמן. יהי שמי רבה מברך, לעלמות מעלמיה יתברך. יתברך וישתבח יתבר ולמה בינשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי לקודשה בריחו לילה מן כה בכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ונחמתה תמירן בעלמה ואמרו אמן. תתקבץ ותהון ובתהון לכל ישראל כל מה והון דשמיא ואמרו אמן. יהי שלום רבה מן שמיא ואחים עלינו וכל ישראל ואמרו אמן. ועושה שלום ברממיו הוא יעשה שלום עלינו וכל ישראל וכל יושבי תבל ואמרו אמן.
And we'll continue now with the Festival Kiddush, page 79. Please rise.
ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם אשר בך בנו מכל עם ורמנו מכל לשון ורישנו במצוותיו ותיתן לאדוני אלוהינו באהבה מועדים לשמחה חגים וזמנים לששון את יום חג השבועות הזה זמן מתן תורתנו במקרא קודש יקל יציאת מצרים בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים מודה קודשך בשמחה ובששון הנחלתנו. ברוך אתה אדוני מקדש ישראל והזמנים.
And we'll flip back to 56 for Elena.
Should we do Shechachianu? Yeah? On page 80, we'll do Shechianu, and then we'll go back to Elenu. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shechechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Now we'll flip back to page 56 for Elenu. If I can find the page. עלינו לשבח לאדון הכל, לתת גדולה ליוצא בראשית, שלא עשנו כוכבי ארצות, ולא שמנו כמשפחות אדמה, שלא שם חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל המונם, ואנחנו קוראים ושכבים ומודים. מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. ככתוב בתורתך אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד.
Please be seated. There's always a special significance, I feel, when we hit the Kaddish Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish, on a festival, and certainly on Shavuot. We're told that everyone, that there are Shivim Panim LaTorah, there are 70 faces to the Torah, that every human being carries within us some special lesson, some aspect of a deep divine truth. And when the holidays come around and those people who taught us that Torah, who were in relationship with us, who loved us, are not here, there's an additional sort of poignancy that adds to the weight of memory. So with that said, I just want to invite anyone who's in a period of mourning, those of us who are observing a yard site, to rise for the Mourner's Kaddish on page 58. Yitgadal v'yitgadash merhaba, bi'alma divrakute, bi'amlich malchute, v'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agalar v'zman kari v'yamru, Amen. Yehi shmei rabba mivarach le'olam olamei amaya, yitbarak v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shmei d'kudsha b'richu, Ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbechata v'nechemata, damiram bi'alma v'yimru, Amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya, v'cheim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru, Amen. Oseh shalom v'mamav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'yimru, Amen. Please be seated.
What page is it? 62?
Well,
All right, we'll conclude with Yigdal on page 62. Yigdal Elohim Chai v'yishtabach Hanim zavein her mesiuto Echabrin yachid keyichudo Elam v'gam ein sov le'achduto Ein lo damut hagov ve'ein oguf Lo na'aratz elav kedushato Kermon lechol davar asher nivra Rishon ve'ein reshit lereshito Hino adon olam ve'kol notzar Yoreh gdulato u'malchuto Shefar nevuato netano El anshe segulato ve'tifarto Lo kam ba'Yisrael kemo sheyod Aviu mabit et unato Torah temet natan le'amoel Ad yanavio neman beito Lo yachal yifaev ve'lo yamir dato Le'olamim le'zulato צופה ויודע סתרנו, מביט לסוף דבר בקדמתו. גומל לאיש חסד כמבלעו, נותן לרשע רק הרישתו. ישלח לקץ ימין משיחנו, לפדות מחי קץ ישועתו. מתים יחייל ברוב חסו, ברוך עדי עד שם תהילתו. מתים יחייל ברוב חסו, ברוך עדי עד שם תהילתו. ברוך תהיה.
give us just a moment and we'll get started. It's really, I love Shavuot because where else do Jews gather in the evening to study Torah for hours on end? And in younger days, right, we would stay up all night long. I don't know that I have that capacity, but for many of us, I think if we could start studying at, say, 4:30 in the morning when we wake up, you know, we might get a better crowd. On a more serious note, when Laura and I were living in Israel during the Second Intifada, it was easy to think that things were just really, really bad. And they were. But one of the phrases that you would hear the average Israeli just say on the street is, Yesh Atid. Yesh Atid. There's a future. Right? And we don't always see the future, right? We get so enmeshed in the day-to-day, the challenges of whatever that's bringing to us, that it can seem far away and out of sight. But tonight, we're really dedicating this Shavuot to tomorrow's Torah today, as represented by two of the 70 faces of Torah, with Brianna Kaplan and Nico Losarelli coming up to us from the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies, where both Rabbi Posen and I are musmachim, and it's really wonderful to get to spend the holidays with you in conversation, and I'm definitely looking forward to it. So we're going to spend an hour or so in discussion with some questions, and then we're going to have some time open as well for Q&A, and hopefully we'll get to, well, we certainly are going to learn from each of you, but have an opportunity really to sort of maybe think about Yesh Atid in a different way as we begin to hear from this next generation of rabbis who are actively thinking about that and your careers and what that's going to mean in a time of change. So given that, let's just begin by starting out, where the heck is the American Jewish community heading?
All right, I'll take this one. I don't know if it's on. Yeah, there it is. Hi, everyone. I'm Nicola Sorelli. Such a pleasure to be here, and so wonderful to meet so many new folks and to learn and daven with so many new folks. So thank you. So where do I see the American Jewish community heading? Well, first of all, I think it's a good sign that people are showing up to shul, that you're all here. I hope we continue to head in that direction of showing up to shul. I think that it's no sort of, mystery or secret that it is a little bit harder to get people in the door these days. Who are we engaging? How are we engaging them? How are we appealing to them? How are we not appealing to them? And I think in order to answer the question of where the Jewish community is heading, we really have to start to answer these questions and maybe sort of grapple with some uncomfortable truths that we're not really necessarily communally ready or willing to grapple with. But it's such a broad question. I think we can answer it sort of in both ways. We could say, oh, it's heading in the absolute wrong direction, it's heading in the right direction, or it's neither of those, it's kind of in the middle. I think that sort of all depends on what your kind of antennas are tuned to, what you're looking for, what you're scanning for. And so, though we have a lot of challenges in front of us, that's for sure, I'd like to think that we're headed in the right direction as long as we, I think really especially now, continue to remember that it's important to dan b'kaf zechut, which is to judge people in, basically give people the benefit of doubt. It's an idea that comes from Pirkei Avot, to really judge people generously, really think about what it is that they're thinking, what it is that they're going through, what it's like to maybe not walk a mile in their shoes, but, to be in their shoes for even a minute if we can and really take that seriously. So I think as long as we hold on to that, we can be headed in the right direction. But again, it's a very big question, and I hope that we're headed somewhere good.
Well, thank you, Nick. And we'll get a chance to drill into that and move more into specifics as we go throughout the evening as well, I hope.
It's going to be funny that I'm saying this as a rabbinical student in a rabbinical school that's affiliated with a denomination of Judaism. But I'm also Gen Z, so I have like a window into what Gen Z Jews are into. Not a lot of them really like denominational Judaism. It's very weird. I don't know if you know what One Table is. Does anybody know what One Table is? So One Table is this organization where they basically give you money to host Shabbat dinner in your home, and you get like $10 for everybody that RSVPs to your Shabbat dinner. I use it. I also like to have Kabbalat Shabbat and Mariv in my home before we have dinner, and there's a lot of people that's the kind of Judaism they're looking for. And it's very interesting, and we'll get to, what I kind of want to do as a rabbi, is how do we get that feeling of closeness and togetherness, which is what I think younger generational Jews are looking for, into a place like a synagogue. And maybe, by virtue a synagogue isn't a place for that, but I actually think that it could be. What I think is interesting is that Gen Z is like the most technologically addicted to, their phones and their screens. And so they crave this togetherness, like really sitting face to face close with people. And we're kind of doing that now, but there's a lot of you like really far over there that I can't even see what your faces look like. So it's, as much as I love to get people in a room together, I think these intimate experiences, it's a yes and situation. So we're going to have our, I like to call them legacy organizations, our, JCCs and our synagogues and our educational organizations. but I also think we need to make room for the kind of DIY Judaism. And not only that, but as these institutions teach people how to do that. Because a lot of people are flying by the seat of their pants, and they're not coming into our buildings, so we don't see them. And so there needs to be some sort of bridge, I think, and that's how we're going to strengthen the path forward. Instead of having these two offshoots of a path, to somehow braid them into one Jewish future. I don't have the answer for how to do that, though. So if anybody has any suggestions, that's what I think we're going to need to be looking at moving forward.
Yeah, I don't think any single person has the answer, but we will get to explore a little bit more. I sometimes, though, what I've come to start talking about is that one of the things I think that we as Jews have done throughout our history is we run parallel tracks in survival, right? There are these experiments in Jewish living, and nobody knows what's going to be stickiest, which is going to have the traction. When Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi sort of snuck out of Jerusalem and started Yavna, there's no way that he could have imagined thousands of years later that rabbinic Judaism would have stuck. We can give him all the credit because it was the stickiest of the experiments, but there were a lot of other attempts that Jews were promulgating at the time. So it's always a good thing to remember that whatever you see is, in a certain sense, an experiment in survival, and more than survival, an experiment in thriving. And that's why it's great to have some different perspectives here as well. So with that, we sort of started, at a higher level. What do you see? I mean, you've sort of named one, but what do you see as the major challenges and opportunities for us now?
I think COVID really did a number on community engagement. It's interesting. In the height of the pandemic, people were craving for community, and they were glued to Zoom and all this stuff. And then as places started to open up, people weren't coming back. Which was I just assumed that everybody would be like, oh my God, we can go back to shul, let's go back to shul. But they were like, oh my God, we have Zoom. We can just Zoom it. I think that's been a major challenge, and it has the residual effects of that. I think it's a challenge and an opportunity, actually, is the technological advancements. Leaving halakha out of it for a second, and whether or not we're going to use electricity on Shabbat and Yom Tov, I think it's been incredibly accessible for people and also challenging, right? So it has both strengthened and also made community building a lot harder. And I think for us to be able to, run parallel with how people are interacting with the world in terms of technology is going to be really important for us. I mean, I think every synagogue that I've been in the door of in the last 3 years has still either Zoomed or live streamed their services. I think this is being
We're
streamed,
being,
right? Okay.
hello to everyone at home, yes.
Hello. Right, but that's what I'm saying, right? Is so there are people, and it's not just because of COVID, right? It opened the door for people who have always had accessibility issues, have not been able to come to services or to come to synagogue for various reasons, to, quote unquote, come in the door and be part of the community. I think when everybody was at home, we did a really good job of making sure that everybody felt included. I think we're moving to a place, and it's debatable, whether we want to remove ourselves from the live stream and the Zoom or accept the fact that this is how a lot of people are going to engage. And that's a major challenge for, a conventional synagogue who is trying to bring people inside. So I think it's the technology for me is both the challenge and the opportunity. How do we strengthen the community using technology, and how is it going to kind of hinder what we're trying to do in terms of community building? I think there's a way to do it, but we're learning that every day. I'm glad that there are people that can watch us, and I'm also glad that you guys are all here. So challenging and an opportunity.
Yeah, I kind of want to build on a couple of things that Bree said on the previous question and just now about sort of these more homespun, innovative sort of davening spaces that we see, or Shabbat table spaces, whether it's through one table or whether it's through, there's this great organization called BASE, which is like an affiliate of Moishe House. I just went to a really wonderful Kabbalah Shabbat. We were doing we had like a davening, sort of a musician circle, and then, we were davening in the round. And it was like the kind of davening that really got me excited about coming to shul in the first place, of just something really soulful, something really creative, low pressure. Everyone's there to learn. Everyone's there to be excited. And it's more or less a judgment-free space, I think that we live in an age of so much creativity. Anybody can, put content on the internet. It's still a challenge to sort of get a following and to be successful, of course. I don't want to diminish the challenges of that. But there's such a capacity and a thirst for a creative outlet. And I see these spaces as really satisfying that desire towards creativity, which is, I think, something that is a major opportunity. Excuse me. So I guess I'm thinking back about how, during my Israel year, some of my really good friends were like the firmest of the firm conservative Jews. A lot of them were like, I'm actually Orthodox or non-Orthodox. So whatever, everyone was sort of figuring out where they landed and what their practices were. And there's a lot of value to that. And also it felt sometimes as like it was a critical space, and sort of contrasting that to critical, not negative, but critical in the sense of like, really got to think hard about this, about the minutiae of the halakha. But that plays a specific role. Whereas when I think about this sort of base Kabbalah Shabbat, it was just like open and creative, and people were able to ask questions. And for us as like rabbis and future rabbis, it's really exciting to even have an opportunity to be like, you want to learn about what Kiddush is? I would love to talk to you about that. You want to learn about how to make Shabbat meaningful? I would love to talk to you about that. And I think a big opportunity, I think a big challenge is that there are a lot of conversations that aren't being had, but the flip side to that is just having those conversations. That's the opportunity, and creating spaces for that. I think it's also important to talk about what are the major challenges and opportunities for us now. I think also the elephant in the room is our relationship to the other half of the Jewish people in Israel, and how that politically is developing, and how we continue to keep our connection to the state of Israel and to the dream of Jewish self-determination in an age where that's really being put quite literally in the crosshairs. And I think that's a big can of worms. I think it's a later question on the list, but that is, I think, very obviously a major challenge that we face today.
So thanks. It's interesting because you each in different ways touched on these smaller sorts of gathering spaces. And years ago, when I had just finished rabbinical school, I remember speaking to Julie Schoenfeld, and the RA at that point was trying to figure out, how can we finance people to just hang out on the street in the way that Chabad did, right? So on one hand, that need or that notion has been out there. Whether we figured out how to capitalize on it, I don't think we have. And it may be more eternal than we imagine, right? I mean, there's a full generation between us at that point. And then simultaneously, one of the things I certainly have thought about with the whole move to live stream, et cetera, was that moment when the newspapers all went online and there were no paywalls and nobody knew how to finance it, and a lot of legacy institutions, as you put it, bellied up. We lost a great many newspapers at that time, and eventually people figured out how to create the revenue they needed to keep those enterprises going. And I think that's one of the same things that we're facing right now with these shifts is how do you make sure the resources are there so that we can continue these different sorts of experiences and experiments.
Yeah, I just want to add one thing. You mentioned Chabad. Chabad is so good at having apps and an internet presence, and also the mitzvah tank is back. It was gone for a while because the old one had, I don't know what the circumstances were, but it burned down or something like that. But I was just in New York. The mitzvah tank is back. It's very exciting. I'm very excited about it. But I think that
what is a mitzvah tank?
The mitzvah
for those
tank.
Who don't know.
All right, I'm so glad you asked. The mitzvah tank is basically like a camper. It's just like an RV that is set up for people to come in and do mitzvot. So Chabadnikim, people who go to Chabad will hang out outside and say, have you rep tefillin today? Do you have Shabbat candles? Do you want to come in and daven? Do you want to come in and say a prayer? Whatever. It's a space to bring people in to do mitzvot, which is just really amazing. So I think we have a lot to learn if we're thinking denominationally in the conservative movement from Chabad and from other streams of Judaism, for sure. I just wanted to sort of call that in the room because I think that the work they do is amazing, and I want to figure out how we can do that in the conservative movement as well.
Excellent. Yeah, I got an email inviting me to Shavuot ice cream at Chabad later today, so I'm not gonna give you any information because we want you here. No, and besides, the invitation was to me. It would be for anyone. You know how Chabad works. So the generational changes, right, that we're beginning to outline a little bit. Intimacy, outreach, Judaism happening outside of institutions. What do you discern are the different set of needs for how the American Jewish community constitutes itself? And I ask that in part because Rabbi Schulweis, VBS of blessed memory, right, was so instrumental in creating the Havarah movement. This congregation in its time had Havarot, and they were really a model to give people that experience of intimacy, relationship, of a chevra, of a small group of people who you were committed to. And while the desire for those sorts of connections, I think, is just perennial and basic human needs, right? Chavarot as an institution, as a concept, had its day, right? All of these things have a certain lifespan to them, and then they stop, right? We've had questions here in this community, because we used to have that, to bring it back, and the sense is that even if we were to bring it back, it would need a very different label or name, right? Because of things change, and Jews also, we always want something new. So how do you see that playing out? What are those needs, these arising needs for this next generation of Jews?
Gen Z doesn't know how to make friends naturally. I have discovered this. Like, if you're not in school, where like friends are literally given to you on a silver platter, we don't know how to befriend people, which is why things like Chavurot are very important, because they essentially like give you these friends with, like-minded interests. Everyone's Jewish. You get to do Jewish together, as people say. And I'm still in school, so like luckily I have somewhat of a social life given to me on a silver platter, but it took a lot for me to like find friends outside of rabbinical school, which like rabbinical students need, by the way, friends outside of rabbinical school, or else like your hair starts to fall out. But no, it's really nice. It's really important. I think it's going to go back to the addicted to our phones. We don't know how to socialize. And I think that makes it really hard to build community, because even for me, and like I'm trying to be a pulpit rabbi, like I go into a new space, and if nobody comes to greet me, I'm not introducing myself to anybody. I don't know how to do that. I mean, I do, and I choose not to, because I, get a little awkward. But I think that there are people that have that. Everybody in their even late 20s now, I would say, especially early 20s, anybody that was in college during the pandemic, their like natural socialization skills are very poor. And so I think we need to sort of like, be the catalyst for that, right? It's not enough to just tell people that shul is at 9:30. Maybe the Chavarah model would work again, or maybe something like it, but something of, common interest, a small group of people that, meet over and over again. I mean, I remember when I was growing up, our Chavarah went on like winter break vacation together. I still talk to my friends that my parents decided their parents were going to be friends because they, like to have Shabbos dinner together. And it doesn't exist in a lot of places anymore. I think it would behoove synagogues to bring that back. And then you have a group of people that all go to the same shul. What are they doing on Saturday morning? Let's go to shul, and then after we can have lunch, right? It all eventually comes together, but it's really hard to make people be friends when they don't know how to socialize. I don't know how to teach people how to socialize because, it's hard. Like, the more we're glued to our screens, the more we're separate from everybody. People don't know how to have a face-to-face conversation, which is a little sad to me because I love talking to people and like actually seeing their face and having a conversation with them. But yeah, I think the synagogues can, and not just synagogues. When I say synagogues, I mean community centers or what have you, can really be the catalyst to bring people together in a space that isn't as daunting as walking into a sanctuary and there's 100 people there, because people who don't know how to socialize really don't want to do that. And that's hard as a person that really wants people to come to shul. If I ask them to come to shul, that's not enough, right? There needs to be more intention in building those relationships, not just as, clergy with lay people, but like forging the relationships between lay people so that they have people that they feel comfortable with and are actually excited to see in a space like this. So I think that's the big generational change we're anticipating. And I'm excited to work on a lot of that in my rabbinate as a person who's only 25 and deeply understands being addicted to their cell phone. This is why I love 2-day yontif, right? Like, I really, really don't get to be on my phone for a long time, and it's quite nice.
So my friend Tony, who's a public school teacher in LA, I remember he and I were having a conversation once, and he said, Nico, these kids do not know how to socialize, just like what you're saying. He was like, they don't go out like we used to. They just sort of hang in bed, and they send Snapchats to each other, TikToks to each other, whatever. He's like, I don't know what to do about it. It's so funny. I feel like I'm at that point where I'm in my life where I'm like, those kids. But it's every generation we do it. So the door of a door. So it's just there's so much so much truth about it. But it's not just a problem for a single generation. It's all of us. There's this sort of device that tells us you're going to be connected to everyone, every little bit of everything all the time. Like Bo Burnham's sort of Netflix special, if anybody saw that during the height of the pandemic, he had this song where he said it was a little bit of everything all of the time, and that was his description of the internet, which felt very, very real and very true. It just is a true statement. And then I think about just the other day in one of the what feels like millions of group chats that I'm in now. It's truly out of control how many group chats. If you have a group chat problem, let's get together and figure out how to shave down our group chats because I can't do it anymore. But my friend Val shared something where it was like an article of like Gen Zers and Gen Xers or whatever are going for like old Nokias and dumb phones to sort of like disconnect from their smartphones. And she said, Orthodox Judaism is once again ahead of the curve, which was incredible because it was like, you're right. Like this notion, it's true. Like this, and that's not a dock at Orthodox Judaism, but I really do think it's true. Like there is a really strong commitment in the Orthodox world to not use technology on Shabbat, which I think has a lot of value, and also that's our sort of religious. It's funny, I want to say religious technology, which is ironic, but that's like our religious stuff as Jews. Like that's us, and the whole world is sort of realizing, oh, maybe we shouldn't be like connected all the time. Maybe we shouldn't be, having just media interface from 6 a.m. in the morning until like 2 a.m. the next morning. Maybe that's not healthy. Maybe I'm actually not connecting with people. So there's this wonderful thing called the National Day of Unplugging, which I'm sure a lot of folks in this room are familiar with, where it's a day, I don't know if it's like a set day, but it's a set day. It's a set day where folks commit to just not using their phones. And I remember at ECAR a couple years ago, which is an amazing non-denominational or post-denominational community in LA, they passed out these little sort of like phone sort of like pouches where you could just put your phone away and just really intentionally say, I'm not going to like connect with this thing, I'm going to connect with the people around me. you know? And I think that the question has become about technology, but how could it not? I think that when we pull out our devices, we do want to connect, right? I think it's so easy to look at something as a negative, but say, like, what's the human need here? Like, what's going on here? And I think that need is to connect, to find community. We find it popping up all over the internet with folks finding communities in one way or another, for better or worse. And I think that this sort of like stepping back and asking, like, okay, what do we already have in our toolkit? Like the Chavurah groups, right? We just restarted one but Temple Betham restarted. I was invited to be part of it. It was our LGBTQ, our queer Chavurah group, and I was like, this is amazing. Like, this is so much fun, and I'm getting together intentionally with like people with shared experiences, and we're here to be social. Like, we're actually that's sort of on the agenda. Be social, meet each other. And I think when we make that explicit, it just makes it so much easier. I also want to sort of address the generational sort of piece of this. We're really in a place where we talk about millennial, Gen Z, Gen Y, Gen X, like as if we're all just totally different populations, you know? And I think it's just there's such an opportunity there to say, like, let's intentionally like put together a program where Gen Xers get together with millennials, or millennials get together with Gen Zers, and it's not about just like poking fun at each other, but it's actually about getting to know one another. It's about getting to know what we've been through, what our challenges are, what we find funny, what we don't find funny. Like I had a moment in Minion a couple weeks ago where a couple people were talking about, they're like, all remembered where they were when JFK was assassinated. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. Like, to me, that's a piece of history. And now I'm at a place where I'm like, oh my gosh, like Gen Z and Gen Alpha. Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying is like we're at a place where this next generation is learning about 9/11 in history, you know? Whereas that's just like a common experience to sort of like share with other folks who remember it, who maybe were touched by 9/11. But it's things like that where you're like, wow, this is so obvious to me, but actually it's not really obvious to maybe the next generation or the generation before. So I think about, like, really, I know I said Lador jokingly a second ago, but really, like, bridging that gap generationally and really embracing that value of Lador is, I think, something that's just so necessary, because we're constantly asking ourselves who's coming through the door, who's not coming through the door. And, yeah, we've got to do it.
That's so profound because, right, the essence of this Jewish multi-millennial experience is that we do share common history, right? And I feel the same way about JFK, though I remember I was driving, I heard it on the radio, driving to Morning Minion when the first tower went down, you know, and then I davened, and I apparently, I don't even remember it, I apparently screamed out, V'lamal shinim lo, you know, there's a line, you know, in the Amidah that says, don't give any sort of hope to the wicked, and the wicked doers in the Amidah, and apparently that was my visceral thing. But we have this mythos, this national story, which says that we may not all have been at 9/11 or JFK, or the pandemic. There'll be a generation that won't know what we're talking about with that. But we're supposed to somehow have this notion that we all were at Sinai together, right? I mean, that's why we're here. And making that visceral in a certain sense is the challenge, really hard, right? To take it so that it's not just a concept, but something felt. And I appreciate you guys being here in a sense to give a little bit of that felt sense of what's needed and of that intergenerational connection that we have, as well as the differences in how we need to respond to those. So let's put that stuff to the side for a moment and begin like the three blind people in a room feeling the elephant. Let's begin to, you know, grasp the trunk or the leg or the ear of an elephant and begin to touch on Israel just a little bit, right? And this will be indirect initially, which is, what does American Judaism look like for some part of a new generation for whom Israel will play a minimal part of their identity. Let's explain the question a little bit more, right? Clearly, between those who are, there's something ironic. There are people who really don't feel connected to Israel, but in that disconnection, it's a huge part of their Jewish identity, right? Because they're standing in resistance to the real state of Israel as it's constituted as an imperfect polity, like all nation states are, right? But it forms who they are by not being connected. And there's probably a larger group of people, or a growing sense of not necessarily apathy per se, which still assumes that there's some sort of, that you're looking towards it and just like whatever, but just that it doesn't really even cross their radar. That's not what they think about. That's not their Jewishness. And we know that those Jews are out there, and that there seem to be, if the demographic lines keep going the same way, they never do. What does that look like? What does Judaism in America look like for those Jews?
It's an easy one. With all due respect, Rabbi, I wanna intentionally not use the word they, but rather use the word we. I think that it can be very easy for us to operate from a place of we and them, or us and them. But if we really commit to, the value of Klal Yisrael and having each other's back and having some sort of unity, having that really mean something, we've also got to listen to the voices that really maybe piss us off, make us uncomfortable, excuse my language, but make us uncomfortable, really challenge us on a fundamental level. That doesn't mean you have to agree with everything. That doesn't mean that we have to internalize it, but at least hopefully we can make a space to really sit at a table, like we're sitting at a table, sit across from one another and really hear each other, really try to understand one another. Because, being a Jew is like being part of one big family, In your family, you may have somebody who voted for one person who voted for another, and you're fighting about it, but at the end of the day, you're still at the same table. It's still your mom, it's still your dad, it's still your brother, your cousin, whatever. That's a little bit what it's like, I think, to be a Jew. We are inextricably, bound together. And when push comes to shove, I hope that we're there for one another. That doesn't mean it's easy. That doesn't mean that we necessarily want to. But I think it's in those moments that we really have to. And personally, Israel is very important to me. It's important to my Jewish identity, and important to my Judaism. The idea that we've turned things around essentially so quickly in history is something unprecedented, to go from not having a nation to having a nation that many Jews call home, maybe many of us call home or could call home, is remarkable. Israel is an imperfect polity, as you said. That's for sure. But it is the realization of so much hard work, so many dreams, so much innovation. Again, imperfect. God, is it imperfect? Aren't we all? Aren't we all imperfect? Isn't this country imperfect? But yet, I have a hard time with a sort of maximalist ideology that wants to throw the whole thing out, right? That's not something that I personally think is conducive to a constructive conversation, but I would want to have the conversation with somebody, because I don't know if anybody here watched or watches The West Wing, but I've been watching The West. This will be going somewhere, I promise. I've been watching The West Wing for the first time with my partner. He's watched it. He's very excited to watch me watch it. And President Bartlett, played by Martin Sheen, says this great thing in
Bartlett 2024.
Yeah, seriously, God. Bartlett 24. So he says this great thing in a presidential debate when he's trying to get reelected. He's like, I'm not the president to the people that agree with me, I'm the president to everybody. And that's also, I think, what it's like to be a rabbi. You know, I can't help, the question wasn't about rabbis, but like I'm thinking, you know, what if we all are, I don't know, what if we can just like take on a little bit of that ethos of like, I'm not just the one who's there for the people who agree with me. I'm going to really try to stretch myself and be there for folks and really hear them and understand them, even if I'm rolling over and can't sleep about it, you know? Because, I mean, what other option is there? The other option is to just shut each other out and not have each other's back, and that's, I just think, no way to be.
Bree, can I ask you to respond to just a little bit differently? Because I'm interested in exploring this also from the way of not so much the disagreement about Israel, but the absence of it for many Jews. And what I mean, right, for a long time, and next, you know, we'll touch on this in a different area, but one of the main organizing principles of the American Jewish community, certainly from 1948 forward, was Israel at the center. And it was the dreams, it was the aspirations, the little JNF, blue and white pushkas, the songs, the bonds. All of it was like, this is what American Jews did. And we were the big brother to the little sibling. We were American dollars, what have you. It organized. It was one of the things we hung it on. I'm wondering about, like, that. You know, what is and one of the reasons that worked is that the narrative of it, of a people returning to their land after millennia, that's a very powerful story. And for those who are not engaged in the story, what would be the equivalent, right? I mean, in terms of the focus, what's a narrative that is sufficiently sticky, again, to be compelling, to organize a next generation?
I have a few things to say. One of them is more about how young people feel about Israel, and then I'll answer your question.
Okay.
Rabbi Kosek mentioned that there's a lot of Jewish folks out there who feel not great about Israel and are strengthened in their Judaism in doing so. This is a very uncomfortable thing to think about. We could push it off. I think what happens a lot of the time is when people, even if they enter a dialogue, they wait for the other person to be talking so that they can say why they're right. Bad idea. So what I've been trying to do is to like actually listen to people and ask them like, what is it about this moment and what's happening 7,000 miles away that like you feel is really impending on your Judaism. And for a lot of people, they see footage of mass death and they don't want to have any part of that. And that's like a very valid feeling, by the way. Like that's like, very objective. A lot of death is bad. And usually people don't want to stay in conversation long enough to kind of unpack the intricacies and the nuances of there's a lot of people hurting, and like to choose sides is really just to like not choose a just future. I think not a lot of people are willing to be in conversation that long to have that conversation, and they just want to wave a flag, and the flag that they choose is the flag that they choose. I don't subscribe to that. In terms of people who just like don't feel strongly about Israel in general, putting the war aside, I think it's, if we look at it in terms of concentric circles, with, ourselves being the innermost circle, and our family and our friends and our, community locally and our community in the country and then global Jewry, it's hard for people to go to that outermost circle, I think. For people that are struggling to find a Jewish community in those first three circles, right? I grew up, my father was a rabbi. We had Shabbat dinner every week. We always were at shul. And then, my parents got divorced, and right now it's just like my mom and my siblings, and they don't do Shabbat anymore. And I go home, and it's like kind of sad for me, and I can't even think about anything else because all I want to do is have Shabbat dinner with my family. So I'm not sure that all of the apathy is about Israel itself. I think that, out of sight, out of mind is a real thing for a lot of people. It's said that we develop object permanence at like a year old. I'm not sure that's true for everybody. But like in a joking way, yes. And also like it's really hard for people to care about people they don't know really far away in a place they've never been to and they don't speak the language. And I think especially for, Ashkenazi Jews, like we really don't identify with Middle Eastern Jewry. It's hard because it's already hard to identify with our own Jewish communities here. I think if we worked really hard on strengthening that Judaism, we would be able to have the Israel conversation, but it's just so far and away from what people are looking for that it's become almost abstract, except for what people see in the news, which is not good stuff. So there's no want, which is a sad thing, right? I lived in Israel for 2 years of my life, and I've gone back. I studied abroad there. I'm going to be going there next summer for, I think it's 10 weeks with my school. And that's not to say that I don't struggle a lot. Rabbi Kozak and I were talking about this. Like every place has got their stuff, right? Nobody's perfect, and we have to be able to have those conversations, because if we're not going to have those conversations, anybody that feels differently than us, they're gone. And we can't have those conversations unless we're willing to. And in order to do that, there's like a couple tough pills we need to swallow. A, not everybody is going to love Israel as much as we do. B, the news paints Israel in a very bad light, and young people watch the news. But more importantly, young people are on social media and watch TikToks about other people talking about the news that are sometimes incorrect. It's very messy. And we can't clean up the whole mess, but the least we can do is try and extend a hand in conversation. And understand, that's pill 3, is that sometimes we're not going to get everybody, right? Not everybody's going to love Israel as much as we do. And that doesn't mean that they're not part of the community. Maybe that means, I know of synagogues that are finishing every service with Hatikva. That's like not a choice I would make, because I know that not everybody wants to go to services and sing a national anthem. Like I would be hard-pressed to sing the Star-Spangled Banner at the end of services. And I think it would be weird. So, and there are also people that like have an issue with nationalism at large, which is a whole other conversation. I don't know. Bring back Pangea 2024? I have no idea. I don't think that's possible. But these things are very nuanced, and I think there are a very select few communities and spaces that are willing to actually take a deep breath and reach out to the people that they feel like are on the outskirts because of their feelings or opinions or beliefs or convictions about Israel. And I think, it's not hard to look at where young people are at right now. If we want our Jewish communities to stay strong and if we want to engage young people, we have to talk to them, even if we don't like what they have to say.
Thanks.
Just to answer the question of just what do you do for people for whom Israel will play a minimal part of their identity? Send them into Israel. Have them visit Israel, And not just on a totally curated trip, but something that's really challenging. I think something that was wonderful about the Israel year that I had last year was that I was there for long enough to really see the ins and outs of everything and really seek out opportunities on my own. It's one thing to have a curated program that's sort of safe and contained, but that's really not as interesting as the real thing, in my opinion. I think it's going to be great. Do birthright. I think it's important. Do, do honeymoon in Israel. I want to do it. It sounds really great. Go, do whatever program you're going to do, but also like do something that's almost counter-program to that. I think about from 2016 to 2017, I did this volunteer program. It was then a Masa program called Achvat Amim, which means Solidarity of Nations. And we did work that was primarily engaging in Israeli and Palestinian coexistence. It was a great program. And I worked with the Jerusalem Youth Course. It was like, I just really, truly loved it. But I was also like, I kind of picked this program almost randomly. And it was still politically really figuring things out for myself. And I guess it was very, like, pretty far left, which I definitely wanted to learn about. And that's, I think, where I was on Israel during that time. I went to UC Berkeley, and that's kind of like the politics that I was steeped in. But at a certain point, it was like, even in this group, there was a lot of they, like the settlers this, the settlers that, they do this, they do that, to the point where it's like, we're talking about people, right? We're not just talking about some boogeyman that we're creating, we're talking about people. And I was like, I think we need to, like, even though politically in this group, maybe there are certain folks who don't want to do it, I think we need to, like, go talk to some settlers. We need to go to some settlements, and we need to actually, like, see these places and talk to these folks. And I really pushed for it, and we did it, and we went to the city of Ariel, which is in the northern West Bank, and then we went to Shiloh, which is sort of was like the original capital of ancient Israel, and where the Mishkan was thought to be. It was very cool. But we learned that it just wasn't as simple as we thought, which I felt like I knew, but I was like, we just need to go see it. Like, there's a difference between second or third generation religious settlers versus secular settlers in Ariel, or Ariel being there for strategic depth, as it was called, to protect from cutting off the north from the south during a war with the north, which we're having right now, whether or not we're calling it a war. That's what's happening in the north. And also people living in the West Bank, primarily Mizrahim, who are Jews of Middle Eastern descent or origin, or whatever word we want to use for that. Each of those words isn't perfect. Who are oftentimes moving to the West Bank because it's so expensive to live in Tel Aviv, right? It's just so much more complicated than I think we give her credit for. So I think the answer for me is go. Like, don't not go. Don't say, forget it. This place is hopeless. Forget it. Like, they can't figure it out. No, go. Go and do some things you really want to do. And also go do some things that you maybe wouldn't choose to do. Go speak to people that you wouldn't necessarily choose to be around. And I think for those for whom Israel is playing a more minimal role, I think that, like, I don't know, maybe this is something I've got to do in my life, but creating programs that really provide that kind of space, because, like, it's really needed. It's really needed.
Thank you. I want to take the same thrust that was behind the last question. You're right, Israel as an organizing principle, and bring it to another central organizing principle, at least in non-Orthodox Jewry, right? And for the last 50 years or so, American Jewry has placed Tikkun Olam sort of at the center, right? More than religion or services or spirituality, right? That has been a major organizing principle of American Jewry. I think that's one of the reasons for the experience of what we're seeing around people's relationship to Israel, right, is we apply sort of what we view as American Tikkun Olam to the Middle East, and those things may not jive. I think they can, and that's a whole other story. But do you see Tikkun Olam still being, peering through our crystal balls, being the main, particularly of Israel, as a glue, as a narrative glue for the Jewish people, is weakening in some ways? I hope that's not. I hope that's temporary. But will Tikkun Olam remain sufficient to keep American Jews together? Or will something else come up?
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Of course.
What kind of Tikkun Olam are you talking about? Because the concept of Tikkun Olam, I feel like when we think of Tikkun Olam, we think about, like, composting and recycling. It's, like, not how it originated. Can you remind
Yeah, so
people
look, yeah, so
what-
I'm certainly not, Nico's leading services. Over the next couple of days, we're going to get to have both Bree and Nico leading services, giving sermons, so I hope you'll all come back for that. But in the Eleni, we said, L'taken olam b'malchut Shaddai, right? To repair, to fix, to clean out the sewer pipes of the world in the image of divinity, right? We know there's a whole history to Tikkun Olam, and I'm really thinking about it in the social action lens that we use, whether that's composting or something more political, or the New York Times sermon that people heard from the pulpit for many decades, right, across the country, right? This was sort of how, it was a really important part of what kept us coming.
Okay, a few things. I think a lot of people are focused on Tikkun Olam. I'm looking at it from an environmental lens just for a moment. 50 years ago, we didn't know how bad climate change was, and we didn't know how bad global warming was, and it wasn't like a thing that we were talking about all the time, or that was like an imminent threat to our existence. We're not there anymore. Like, it's really bad, you guys. Like, the world is not doing well. And so I think if we want to, get back to spiritual or religious Judaism, there's a lot of people, myself included, that are really, really, really looking towards, keeping the earth healthy and alive. Because if we don't have the earth, what, you're going to shul when the world is on fire? Like, I'm not. And so I think that for a lot of people, that seems to be the most imminent threat to our livelihoods, and that's what they care about. Fine, I'm putting that to the side. There's a difference between, I've had this conversation with a lot of people, the idea of being spiritual and the idea of being religious. I actually don't think that you can be one and not the other, but it is possible. I think when we think of the word religious, we think of ritual and going to daven in community, or at least opening up a siddur in your own home and davening, and that's one piece of it. And then spirituality is this kind of otherworldly thing that when you can bring them together, it's great. A lot of people say that they're spiritual, but they're not religious. And a lot of people, they won't admit it to you, but they're religious, but they have a hard time with the spirituality part. Just doing the steps that you're supposed to do over and over again, because this is how you do them. It's bridging the gap between them that is what makes Jewish practice, or any sort of religious practice. I think all religion is actually spiritual and religious, but that's besides the point. It's what makes it work, right? Religion has been around for a long time, and when we only, have bits and pieces of what has made it last for so long, it's going to be really hard, right? And so people who don't feel this, people feel all sorts of ways about God, or they don't feel any sort of way about God, or they feel a few different ways about God, whatever. That's fine, right? They can feel those ways, but what they're worried about is what they can see and feel and hear, and the community around them. And I think to blend in the social action piece, politics, sure, I think the whole world is political. I don't think that you can separate politics. In a world where being queer is political, or having a womb is political, I actually don't think that you can separate politics from other things, so I'm just going to put that out there. If we can infuse the tangible aspects of the world with the spiritual and religious aspects of Judaism, which is, I think, something that we do, we've morphed Tu B'Shvat into this environmental holiday, which I think is actually a beautiful thing, because that gives people a window through the lens of environmentalism into Jewish practice. If we can find more ways to, Sukkot is another one, like palm fronds. You know what I mean, like shaking plants. It's like nice, and then we do things with plants. I think if we find more ways to infuse the tangible world around us with our ancient Jewish spiritual practice and religious practice, or both, it won't be such a separate tikkun olam Judaism versus spiritual or religious Judaism. I think it's actually very conducive to morph them into, caring about the world, this world and the next world, right? That's how we bridge the gap. Right now, there's a gap. So just got to figure out how to, I don't know if we're going to build the whole bridge, but just a little part. I'll work on it.
I think that we really need to meet people where they are. If tikkun olam is a value that someone feels really excited about, I think that's like a way in. It's like, great, you believe in repairing the world. That's an important value to you. You think that, for example, you think we're on our phones too much, like we talked about earlier. Like, you know what? There's actually this great thing called Shabbat, where we have an opportunity to be off of our phones. That's a way into another part of Judaism. Or you are, worried about the environment. There's this thing called Tu B'Shvat. There's Sukkot. We connect with the earth. Or there's this thing called the Shemitah year, where we let the land rest in Israel because we don't want to overtax the soil. Or, it's important to you to make sure that animals are treated with respect. Great. There's a lot of discussion about that in the Talmud, right? There are halakhic concepts about Tzari Balei Chaim not causing harm to animals. The thing about Judaism is that it has everything. It has everything. If someone, I don't want to knock Tikkun Olam. I think it's very important. Not saying that that's what the question is intended to do. But I really want to say that it, just like something else, another aspect of Judaism, is a door into the rest of Judaism, right? So I think that I got to loop this back into what challenges are, I'm going to go backwards here, but what challenges do we face today? How do we get creative about meeting people where they are and really seeing what it is that they need and what they're excited about and saying that, we have it, that, we have it, that, we have it. And also, not only that, you get to be part of making whatever that looks like what it is. So I think that Tikkun Olam, just like any other aspect of Judaism, has just so much vital potential. The question is just how willing are we to be creative? How willing are we to be innovative? How willing are we to sit over and over and over? Because it comes down to it comes down to that willingness.
Thank you, both of you. I want to make sure there's room for a little bit of Q&A, so I just want to give you each a couple of minutes then to sort of turn the conversation more personal, which is, how do you see yourselves parlaying, right, this passion for Judaism, your rabbinic, this rabbinic career that you're stepping into shortly? Where do you see yourself being most effective? Where do you want to share your gifts? How do you see your rabbinate taking shape? Yeah, don't worry. None of us have any idea how it'll turn out. It always turns out differently for everyone in here, right? But we're playing at this point, at least, with that, right?
Okay, I'll say a few things. I think I mentioned I grew up with a pulpit rabbi as a parent. I think that everybody asks me, oh, why did you become a rabbi? And I want to, push back and be I forged my own path, and I am living my own life, but it would, be very untruthful if I didn't mention my upbringing. That's one. But then, on the flip hand, I think the area in which I discovered what I wanted my own rabbinate to look like was twofold. One, working in music with early childhood education. So I teach a lot of, we call it baby in me, because not everybody is a mommy in me. There are lots of different grown-ups that bring their babies to sing songs. So I teach a lot of baby in me classes. And, I think working with kids is like a really big part of what I want my rabbinate to look like. And then on the flip side, I spent a lot of time when I was in college doing two things. One, being a part of my local Chevra Kadisha, which is the washing bodies ritually before burial, as well as I volunteered in a hospice, also doing music there. And so I think, you know, like the happiest moments, like seeing a baby shake a tambourine for the first time, like I just love it. And also like very intimately being in contact with the deceased or the people who are nearing the end of life. That was like the moment for me that made me realize that I want to walk with people in their lowest moments of life. And it's really important. I love going to shul, I love davening, you know, I like teaching, and like, you know, I'm excited that I'll be able to do weddings. Like, I already have friends that want me to do their weddings. That's fine, I will do the weddings. And what, it'll be great. And I think, you know, people remember the rabbi that did their weddings, but people really, really remember the person that sat next to them as their mother was dying in hospice. And I really want to, you know, hone my craft and be that person for people and be the person that people remember. I think pastoral care is like a really, really important part. And I already know that it's like a sliver of the part of being a rabbi. I have learned this much already in my internship this year. And for me, it still is like the most meaningful and gratifying. And like when I get frustrated in my Talmud classes, like that's the piece of the rabbinate that keeps me going. I really enjoyed doing my chaplaincy and like sitting with people who, you know, are kind of scared for where their health is at. And we're not there to talk about their health, right? We're just there to be together. And I think it's important for people to have people to support them through life's challenges. And that's kind of where I want to step in. It's how I see my personal rabbinate evolving.
Thank you.
I think I just sort of like spoke on what sort of gets me out of bed in the morning a second ago of meeting people where they are. I'm really excited about each and every person's Jewish journey. I'm excited about what makes them get out of bed in the morning. Why do they come to shul? Why be Jewish at all? My classes that I'm going to teach shortly is going to be a little bit about that. But like, why are we doing this whole thing? Like, that's what excites me, and I love being in spaces where we can create together, be innovative together, where people can feel empowered through their Jewish journey, that they can be empowered to take on a leadership role. I really love individual stories and the community building that can go along with that, because look, rabbi is a word which sometimes has got a capital R and it's a title and whatever, but it's not about the rabbis, it's about the communities that we build. It's about not that we build, that we step into and we help build. So I'm really excited to continue to build that up, whether it's a really robust lay leadership, whether it's a really robust daily minyan crowd, whether it's just really passionate Chavurah groups, being part of helping people find a way in, because there's always a way in. And I feel like in whatever way I can do that in my rabbinate is what I want to be doing, because I really do think that if we can't help somebody find a way in, it's not on them. It's really a failure of imagination on our part. So that's sort of the ethos and the kind of work that I want to do in whatever way I can. That's what makes me excited about this whole endeavor. Yalla.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right, so first things first.
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense.
To share that.
Oh, okay.
I am Steve Sturgeon.
Hi.
I want to talk about the elephant in the room, but I want to give you a bit, you don't know me.
We hear you.
Okay. Hi there. And I'm not the elephant, and probably you should use pachyderm rather than elephant these days, but we'll go back to it. I've been on a Jewish journey. I grew up as a kid. Dad was in the service. I was all over the place. We didn't have a firm connection where I learned Judaism, and over the span of my growing up, I was bits and pieces. Into adulthood, I became involved in the synagogue because we had kids, and eventually became president of that synagogue back east. I came out here and been involved in this synagogue. But in part of that Jewish journey, the missing word that took 55 minutes in the discussion today was to mention God. Mm-hmm. And I've striven in my life to try to connect, to really sense the divine. I've had times when it was absolutely certain there was God, and most of the time where I'm absolutely convinced there is none. You folks are representing a religion that is, with all the Torah and all the Talmud and everything, is still based on there being a divine entity out there. So my question to you, the easy one, which I asked Debbie Friedman, it's not the first person I've asked, and rabbis, is how do you communicate God to the people that you were working with, to your congregants and to other people?
Okay, I can start. Rabbi Harold Schulweis of blessed memory used to be the senior rabbi at Valley Beth Shalom in Los Angeles. And he was very big on the term godliness. It makes, I think, God a little bit less abstract and more tangible. And his idea of godliness was that there was a little bit, we're all created in the divine image, so there was a little bit of God in every person. And so every interaction was a divine interaction with people. This is a very extreme way of looking at theology. And it's very accessible for people that don't know how to think about God, right? If they just know that, like, even the interaction with the cashier at the grocery store is like two divine beings being in conversation together, it makes you look at the world in a different way. There's that. There's also, like, the idea of like a big old man in chair in sky. I don't like that one. And for some reason, that's how God is first portrayed to a lot of people. Raise your hand if that was like ever your conception of God, was like big old man in the sky, maybe in a fancy chair, right? Like there's at least a few. There's a lot of names for God. I think that like adds to the confusion. And I think to think of God as a singular entity is going to set us up for failure. It's also a lifelong journey, right? Like, so even in rabbinical school, we take philosophy and theology classes. And even at the end of those classes, a lot of the times we have more questions than answers. I think part of being Jewish, right? Yisrael literally means to struggle with God, right? So it's going to be that lifelong journey. If you're confident about your feelings about God, I'm not confident of you, right? Like, I am concerned. Like, if you really are that convicted, I think you've lost the plot, as the kids say. I do think it's a lifelong journey in our relationship to the divine, whether we see the divine as this one entity or we see divinity as, a spark in every human on the planet. And I think whatever we think about God is going to inform how we present ourselves in the world and how we interact with other people, which is like really what we're getting at when we're living our lives through a Jewish lens. I will leave it there. It's very hot.
Okay, great. How do we talk about God? We talk about God. We talk about theology. We talk about what it mean, what the challenges of that are. What does our Torah say about God? Do we agree with that? Do we not agree with that? Why? We talk about periods in our life where we really we're like, yeah, that's God, and periods in our lives where we're like, where is God? Judaism makes it such holy space for belief and for doubt. And I think that both of these come in waves or in seasons or in eras, But I think you're right to point this out. What we need to do is we need to talk about God and we need to talk about theology, because I don't know, it's not an easy topic, that's for sure, but like, it's what, depending on what we believe, I'll speak for myself. I believe that like the divine like animates the universe, whatever that looks like, whatever that means. I know that I feel a strong conviction that there is something bigger than myself, right? And we can call that a million things. But I think that the first step is to talk about God. I know that it sounds so simple and so silly, but really it's true. Just do it. Let's talk about, that's a bit of an ironic reference to make to Nike, which is like a Greek god. Anyway, a couple friends of mine recently have said, like, I don't know if like this conservative Judaism thing is working for me because it's just so cerebral. We're just so in our heads all the time. And I think that's something to really contend with and say, like, what does it mean to like really, like, yeah, let's have the cerebral. I love the cerebral, but also I'm kind of two minds. I love the cerebral and I really love like the spiritual and the God language. So like, how do we provide those spaces? How do we meet that need? I guess I'm just gonna sound like a broken record. Let's talk about God and let's figure out how to do that. Zeo, not an easy thing, but let's do it.
Hi, thanks for being here. I want to go back to the question about Israel, and it's sort of a multi-layered question. I'm religious and spiritual. I'm Israeli. My kids were born in Israel, and I one is, we heard from you about your thoughts about Israel in terms of connecting other people to Israel, but I'm really curious to know where it's falling in rabbinical school and how those conversations are shaping in terms of amongst rabbinical students, because not everyone, as you said, is connected to Israel, and you guys are the leaders for the most part in synagogues, which leads to the other question, which is that I've come, since moving back from Israel, have really felt that, and forgive me, that the synagogue is perhaps not the center of Jewish life anymore, even for observant people. And I'm really curious I'd love to open up that conversation. There's this whole renaissance of Jewish culture, which includes a lot of observant people, myself included, my family included in that, and I would love to know more about how that's shaping.
In terms of how rabbinical students feel about Israel, it is all over the place. At our school in particular, I think, after October 7th, we kind of just didn't talk about it for several months. And then, because I don't think the administration we were also in the midst of a move of our campuses, and there was a lot going on. And whether it was an assumption that we all kind of felt the same way about it, or I don't know what it was. We didn't talk until April. And then we had an all-school conversation where basically people just had the opportunity to share where they were at in this moment, what they were thinking about, what was painful for them, what kind of future they want to see, what they're thinking about as we're entering the rabbinate. And a lot of people said a lot of things, and my one takeaway was that I don't think anybody's on the same page, which is frightening but also comforting. I think it opens the door to a lot of conversation, especially thinking about our lay communities. Even if rabbis don't agree on everything, right? How are we going to expect people in our synagogue to all be on the same page about things if the Jewish professionals are in such disagreement? So I think that was one. Do you want to say anything about that? About rabbinical students?
Yeah. To quote my friend, rabbi and mentor, Rabbi Adam Greenwald, when talking about Jews to other people, he says, Jews, we're just like everybody else, but all the more so. And I think that goes for rabbis and rabbinical students. We're just like other Jews, just all the more so. People's political views run the gamut, for sure. And to Ziegler's credit, they really provided the space for us to have this conversation, and everyone was really able to voice their opinion, which was incredible. And there was tension in the room that it was productive discomfort, which is what you want, right? That's what I want. I'll say that's what I want. I won't speak for anybody in this room, but I want productive discomfort, not unproductive discomfort. That's a waste of my time, and that's a waste of your time, and that's a waste of energy. So really a lot of respect to our deans for providing that space. I will speak personally. I find myself concerned by folks who are becoming rabbis who are either openly dismissive of Israel or who are openly I guess antagonistic to and about Israel. From my perspective, I think that this is an issue worth discussion, worthy of discussion, because it concerns me. Because the state of Israel is, this is one of the only times in history we've ever had both a state of Israel, or a Jewish state, and the diaspora. It was mostly just the ancient kingdoms of Israel back in the United Kingdom, the divided kingdom back in the biblical era, or it was galut. It was the diaspora. It was either one axis or the other. But now we have both. We have both of these centers of Jewish life, and one strengthens the other, and it's really important for there to remain a connection. I feel like I'm sort of saying the same thing over and over and about that. You get it? I think we should have a connection to Israel. But it really is true that so much Jewish culture and just flourishing has come out, is in the state of Israel, has come out of the state of Israel, informs, Jewry. I'm not just going to say American Jewry, but world Jewry. I really, for me, Israel will and is a central part of my rabbinate. I'm part of the Israel committee at Temple Beth Am, where I intern, where I'm going to be interning again next year. I'm going to be the Merkaz campaign captain for the World Zionist, the WZO elections. This is important to me as a rabbi. It's not important to other people necessarily in their rabbinate, and that's them. But I can say for me that it is. But as I said before, to be a Jew is to be part of a family, and we've got to be able to sit across the table from one another and share a meal.
Thank you, Nico and Brianna, for your words. And one of the things that really spoke to me about what you said, Nico, was the whole idea about getting people to go to Israel. And I think it's a lot harder to be dismissive of a whole project of Israel if you've actually been there and you've seen something. And I can speak from personal experience, having grown up in a household I think somewhat similar to Brianna's, where we celebrated Shabbat and all the holidays and everything like that. But as a teenager, I was pretty apathetic. Went to Israel, had a very transformative experience, and kind of found a place to kind of hang my hat. One of the things that was a little bit interesting to me about what you were saying, though, about rabbis who are dismissive of the project of Israel, and I found that actually astounding. And so I'd sort of like to get maybe a little bit of a larger sense about where people's interactions with Israel came from. It's a lot harder to be dismissive of a project if you've been there. Now, you may not like certain things about the project, about Israel as a project, but how could you be dismissive of Israel as a concept if you've already been there? And I just don't understand that. Maybe you could amplify that a little.
I have to say that being that I'm not dismissive of Israel or openly antagonistic toward Israel, that's not a question that I can answer. That's not a question for me to answer, and I am hesitant to answer for somebody else. So that I would hope that question is posed towards someone who does hold that worldview. I can say, though, that I think that we're all in process, you know? Sometimes we have moments where, look, even, you know, sometimes we see what maybe the government is doing or what, you know, one group is doing or a political group or whatever is doing in Israel, and we're like just feeling really down about it, feeling pretty critical about it. And we need to be able to, like, you know, make space for that. You know what I mean? Maybe I don't know, maybe people are reaching a sort of a, I don't know if this is going to make any sense, but like, let's say like sort of like teenagers reaching sort of a rebellious part of their adolescence. Maybe part of expressing that is being like, I'm going to, you know, as we all did it as teenagers, I'm confident saying that like we sort of like push away authority because we're trying to exercise our own autonomy. You know, maybe that is a season that people, like folks will sort of like see, you know, maybe Israeli politics that they've been raised to believe in one way or another, and during that period of time, they're going to push away those politics. They're going to challenge those politics, and that's an era in their life, and that's a season of their life. Maybe they may even be openly antagonistic or dismissive. But I don't know. I have to hope that we can make space for those seasons and those fluctuations and those changes, because I know that in moments of doubt, I really want to be able to have that space. So I want to make sure that we provide that space. But again, I am sort of, again, hesitant to ask a question about a worldview that I do not hold. So if maybe we have another opportunity at some point in the future to have a panel like this, and we do have, it's about Zionism or Zionisms or anti-Zionism, maybe that'd be a question that we could sort of, that I would feel comfortable answering. Yeah. Free, did you want to say
And
anything?
this may be the last, or maybe there's time for one after this. We'll have to play that by ear.
Hi, so I was a congregational rabbi for 40 years, 33 years in one place, tried a lot of innovative stuff. And looking back, I feel that so much energy and resources, human and financial, is expended just on maintaining what you got. And to be able to go outside of the four walls, because that front door of the synagogue is a big threshold, invisible for people. Especially people who don't know much. They think if I go in there, I don't know anything, everybody else knows everything, they're going to judge me. So getting outside the walls, which we tried to do in various ways, but are you thinking about ways that in the conventional structure, because there's a lot of people doing outreach out there, great stuff, that there are ways a synagogue can extend a pseudopod out into the world, while at the same time, you've got your chevra there too, who have their needs and who you indeed, and are, paying the bills too. So, what do you think?
Yeah. You go first.
It's a fascinating question. I was reading about the concept of a Beit Am, which is ironically Beth Am, which is where Nico is the intern. But the concept of a Beit Am is like, it's not just Beit Knesset or Beit Midrash or Beit Tefillah, right? It's the concept of all of these together. So, I think we have all these ideas of like what DIY Judaism can look like outside the four walls of a synagogue. But there's really no reason that we're not doing those things here. We at least have a lot of rooms. Lots of synagogues have lots of, there's a lot of opportunity. I think, one, we need to be reaching out to lay people more and asking them, what is it that you want? And then sometimes the answer after they give us their answer is, okay, well, let's figure out a way to do it together, instead of okay, we'll get back to you and let you know what we came up with. Because a lot of the times those things fall through the cracks, and you ask for feedback. I'm thinking about this in terms of high holiday surveys. I don't know where those things, I know that the board looks at them, and then I don't know what they do with them. I think maybe they make changes, right? But in the grand scheme of things, what changes are you making to high holidays that are that drastic, right? That's a bad example. But to have real intimate experiences within the four walls of a synagogue, I mean, that brings together everything that I think I talked about in the first 45 minutes of our panel, was like, how do we get these DIY intimate experiences with people who are craving Judaism but like don't jive with shul life? You can do it here. Doesn't need to be in the sanctuary. Like if people want to learn how to make cholent, like, okay, go in the kitchen and let's make cholent together, right? Like that's Jewish life too. I think to make space in synagogues for things that like we wouldn't think of as conventional synagogue programming, it's actually not such a horrible idea. And I think it's actually a really important part of where the American Jewish community is going, because then, you know, naturally, like if you have things in the shul, people get more comfortable coming to the shul, even if they're just coming for the cholent class. Maybe they'll stay for Mariv, and then once they get comfortable coming to weekday Mariv, maybe they'll come to Friday night services, and then, you know, it's a snowball effect. So to make a synagogue more like a Beit Am, and, you know, we have JCCs, and I've been to the Eastside Jewish Commons. I was talking about that with Marlene. It's a very interesting place. It's not a synagogue, though, right? And so to infuse our synagogues with those types of things that we wouldn't normally associate with synagogue life, I actually think it's going to make a world of a difference.
I just really want to thank you, Bree, for that early advertising, because we are going to have a Cholent Festival here this year. You guys don't know about it, but Lisa and Marlene are waving their hands there. Yes, I'm reprising my old Cholent days. So yeah, so we'll get you a free bowl if you come back up or something.
Okay, great.
So I really want to thank both of you for sharing your wisdoms, your souls with us, your questions. Because there are no simple answers to this, and at the same time, and going back to Steve, it is hopefully about encountering those moments of awe that recharge us, that let us know in a Kishka way that we really are part of something larger, and that each of you in your own desire to choose one of the craziest professions any idiot could actually go into, represent, you know, that you are part of that mosaic of Jewish life, and it is constantly shifting and growing and changing, and sometimes it's hard to perceive that there is an image from all those little bits of the mosaic, but that when we step back, we know that it is there. Historians get to do this, and we get to do this with each of us as one little tiny bit, one little image of what it is to be a Jewish people moving through time, connected to God and one another, to holy texts and learning. And on this night in particular, to have that divine person who does not have a long gray beard and a chair, hold the mountain over us and say, will you take this? Will you take this crazy thing we call Torah and live it and have it change you, and in turn pass it on to those who come after you. So thank you for being one link and one part of the great mosaic. We're going to take a break for a little bit of cheesecake. The rabbis and Moshe Rabbeinu long ago realized that if you have a little bit of sugar at this time of the day, it really helps with your learning. Please stick around, in part because our two rabbinical students have worked really hard for their classes, and I'm really looking forward to each of these classes. I'm looking for my little sheet with the specifics right now. So Nico's going to be at the next session, Being Jewish on Purpose with Purpose, Renewing Our Relationship with Torah. Brianna will sort of wrap up the night with lessons from the Golden Calf, trauma and recovery. That's something I think any of us who went through or is going through this particular period understands. And there's also going to be some beautiful music. Both of these people are musicians, by the way, which is really great. And looking forward to that davening. But we'll get to have a little bit of music as well, because as the night goes on, right, we need different modalities. That's what we've been talking about, ways to engage. So thank you, everyone, for your engagement, attention, and presence this evening. Let's go have a little cheesecake and coffee, and we'll come back here in 15 minutes or so.
Everything's in here, right? Okay. Oh, thanks. יישר כוח. Where's the bathroom in here? Thank you. I will be back.
Huh?
I was thinking about asking a question, and I wasn't sure how to construct it. You were right there, like right there.
There's too many people and too many questions. Hello. You're not the doctor. Yeah. All right then. Right, fair. Okay. There could be two sessions. We're all gonna make it.